McCarthy strike a deal. Joining us now is the Republican Congressman Mike McCaul of Texas, who is also the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, or House Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much for being here today. You said you had hoped to get a deal by the end of this week. Where do talks stand right now?
I think we're getting very close. I'm the eternal optimist. I know that Kevin McCarthy's been meeting with the president, one-on-one, but also the staff has been working very hard. And I think it's really down to details at this point. Nobody really wants to default on the full faith and credit of the United States. I think, as you pointed out, it would have a disastrous effect on our financial markets. As I understand it, it could be as early, a deal could be cut as early as tomorrow. And then lawmakers, they'd have to write the bill. And then 72 hours, we come back, which would be next probably Wednesday, is my guess, to vote on a debt ceiling increase, along with meaningful spending cuts.
So if they could reach a deal as soon as tomorrow, does that mean lawmakers should still leave Washington today if no deal is made by then?
Well, what they do is typically they have to write the bill, of course, and write it according to the details of the compromise. And then there's a 72-hour period by House rules. And then it goes to the Rules Committee, then it goes to the floor. So, I'm just, again, this is speculative, but I would say midweek next week. And so I think lawmakers will probably return Monday or Tuesday and then possibly vote on Wednesday. At least I hope so. I don't think anybody wants to default on this. Look, we passed a good bill. Now, we voted to raise the debt ceiling responsibly, but we wanted, spending cuts in return for that. And that's what's being negotiated right now.
Are Republicans prepared to make any new concessions that you're aware of that would get them to a deal by tomorrow with the White House?
Well, as I understand, the president wants to cap spending at 2023 levels. The Speaker and Republicans want to cap it at 2022. That's discretionary non-defense spending. And so that's really where the negotiations lie right now. And also the COVID, unspent COVID funding. Those are really the two big highlights that are being negotiated right now.
You keep talking about how bad it would be if the U.S. defaults. That seems pretty obvious to everyone. Economists say that as well. But I want you to listen to something that former President Trump said about the idea of the U.S. defaulting on its debt.
We have to start paying off debt. But when we have a debt limit, and they use that very seriously. Schumer came in with Nancy Pelosi, and they were using it. We'll violate it. We'll do whatever. They talked a whole lot different than they do right now. I say to the Republicans out there, congressmen, senators, if they don't give you massive cuts, you're going to have to do a default.
Are those comments from the GOP frontrunner reckless?
Well, look, this is my 10th term in Congress, and we go through this. I've seen this movie many times, and we go to the brink. Sometimes the government's been shut down. It doesn't favor anybody. And I think responsibly, it's not the right move. And, I think it's important that we reach, a compromise. And I think we will, in this case. We've done this before. And the few times that we have shut down the government, it's been very temporary. And we have seen the markets respond in a very negative way. So, I think that what the former president's trying to say is we're at a $32 trillion debt right now for the nation. We're handing that down to our children. And we have to start, taking responsibility for that. We can't sustain this path. A $32 trillion debt that we're going to pass down is, to me, is really immoral and irresponsible.
But what he was saying is it was a different standard when he was in office, and he said they shouldn't use the debt limit as a negotiating tactic, which is now what's happening. And he said it's different just because he's no longer president. But I do want to ask, you're also the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. As I said, you're investigating the exit of Afghanistan, the withdrawal. You were at the State Department able to view some key documents. Have you heard from State Department officials whether or not they are going to share those documents with the rest of the members of your committee yet? And if so, are you prepared to pull that contempt resolution that you had prepared for Secretary Blinken?
Well, I did have a chance to read the classified cable. Very stark, dire warnings from our embassy employees, 23 of them, on the ground in Kabul a month before it fell. Everything they predicted actually happened. And it's unfortunate the administration didn't listen to what they were saying because they were actually spot on. And I applaud them for taking the courageous step to do a dissent cable, which is very extraordinary, Caitlin. It's very rare that that's done. And so the way I look at this is I got to read it, and so did the ranking member. But, you know, I think the rest of the members of the committee, pursuant to the subpoena, have every right to see this as well. We have a lot of Afghanistan veterans. You saw two of them with Tapper and that piece prior. And, you know, the two that chair the oversight, one, Brian Mast, who lost his legs in Afghanistan, and the other one, Jason Crow, the Democrat, served in Afghanistan. I can't really look them in the eye and say, hey, I got to read this thing, but you're not going to get access to it yourself. Frankly, I think the American people should be able to read what their embassy employees were thinking at that time. Their state of mind is critical a month prior to the fall of Afghanistan. And everything they predicted in that cable actually happened. And that is the immediate collapse, the Taliban taking over, leaving American citizens behind, and our Afghan partners that we promised we would protect and save them, and yet we left them behind only to be hunted down by the Taliban. I think it's really incredulous. And I'm negotiating with the Secretary to answer your question.
Okay.
I prefer not to go down the contempt road, and I don't think he wants to either. He'd be the first Secretary of State ever to be held in contempt by Congress.
So no word on whether you're prepared to pull that resolution. One last question. Yesterday, we saw Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announce that he is running for the Republican nomination in 2024. Last night, he was asked about a key issue that is going to be asked to every Republican presidential candidate. That was on Ukraine. This is what he said.
If you are elected president, you may be the first one in a while to have worn the uniform. How would you address the ongoing war in Eastern Europe between Russia and Ukraine on day one of a Ron DeSantis presidency?
Well, first, I think what we need to do as a veteran is recognize that our military has become politicized. You talk about gender ideology, you talk about things like global warming that they're somehow concerned, and that's not the military that I served in. We need to return our military.
He didn't really answer that question. He didn't answer that question. Do you believe anyone who is running for your party's nomination for president should be able to clearly articulate their position on Ukraine?
I do. I think they should be honest with the American people where they stand. This is a very important issue. You know where I stand on this. I think we absolutely need to support Ukraine in this fight against Russian aggression. When I went to Taiwan and when I was in Asia, all the leaders there said whatever happens in Ukraine impacts Taiwan. This is a struggle for the global balance of power. Putin and Xi, Chairman Xi, China, are allies. Putin has decided to invade Europe, largest invasion since World War II. And Chairman Xi is threatening the Pacific, the likes of which we haven't seen since my dad's war, World War II. And so I think an honest discussion is important with any candidate. I do think privately, and I've talked to advisors to a lot of these potential nominees, that privately they do support what we're doing. But they need to have the moral courage to stand up and speak the truth about what's happening in Ukraine, including the war crimes and the atrocities that I get briefed on that are really outrageous and just sickening, to be honest.
Yeah, and I should note Trump, who is the front runner, also wouldn't say if he wanted Ukraine to win or if Putin was a war criminal. But Congressman Mike McCaul, chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, we always appreciate your time on this show. Thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Thanks, Caitlin. And